Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in today. Today's guest is Will Darling. Will is a DJ, also a remixer or producer. As well as that, he runs his own YouTube channel called EDM Tips, where he teaches people on how to make electronic dance music. So without further ado, thank you very much for coming on to the show today, Will.
You're very welcome indeed. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So, Will, tell me a bit about yourself. Tell me your background.
Oh, so I mean, how far back do you want to go?
As far as a teenager with your aspirations of, were you into music when you were a teenager?
Yeah, so the first, I mean, started learning piano when I was about 9, and then when I was 11, I heard the Prodigy Out of Space playing from my older brother's bedroom upstairs. So I ran up, and it was a tune called Out of Space by the Prodigy, and I ran upstairs and I was like, "What's this? It's got these amazing chords, and then it's got this fat beat. I love it. It's amazing." So then I started getting into production at the age of 11, really, like on my brother's Amiga 500. Got my first pair of decks when I was 15. I visited my older brother at university, and his flatmate had a pair of Technics. And yeah, I've always done art and design and music. Those are the three things that I've always done with my time. And then yeah, that's how I started in it, really. And then worked in a few bands, playing keyboards, producing a band, recording in a few studios, DJing in a few clubs. Then finally got to move to London in about 2005, and that's where I started DJing every weekend. Yeah, and traveling around a bit, doing a few gigs abroad. And then about 4 years ago, no, I moved down to the Isle of Wight about 5 or 6 years ago, which is about 100 miles south of London, basically, because this is where my family lives, and the rent in London was killing me. So then I started EDM Tips. I thought I can't, I was still DJing a bit, but obviously the scene down here isn't the same as what it was in London. So then I started focusing on that, really, and still doing a bit of freelance music production and mixing and mastering on the side. But about, a year and a half ago, EDM Tips became my full-time job.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, you've been doing that for a while there, I see. So, with the training with the piano, was it actually classical music or classical trained piano, or was it just general sort of stuff where you're learning?
It was classical piano. I didn't really apply myself. I kind of enjoyed it a bit, but I was never really good. But it definitely helped to have some classical training for sure.
So, do you reckon it's key with producers to have some sort of classical background when coming to producing music? Is it a big help to you?
I don't think it's necessary, but most of the time I would say it's a really big help. But on occasion, it can kind of limit you because you know what you should be doing. So then you don't stumble across as many happy accidents. But overall, I would say with 90% of the cases, being able to play a musical instrument is going to help you.
Okay, I get that.
Guitar, piano, if you can sing, all of that stuff's really helpful.
Okay, so so having some sort of musical background is a great help, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so with yourself getting into production, was it easy at the start to make music, or was it a long pathway?
Oh, a long pathway. Absolutely. Yeah, a long, constant pathway, which is why you've got to love it, because if you're gonna, to make any inroad, some people, if they really focus, and in this day and age with the internet being what it is,
Mm.
people can make something of themselves in the industry much faster. It was who you knew, which part of the world you lived in. You had to buy expensive equipment, which would limit people, whereas now it's a lot more democratized. So I think you can make inroads a lot faster now.
Okay, so with the DJing side of things, was it easy to get gigs at the start, or did you have some obstacles or challenges along the way?
Um, I can't think of anything I've done of any value that's been easy. um, I remember going, but the biggest difficulty
Mm,
is your own mind and your doubts. So, when I first got my first gigs when I was a teenager, I had the arrogance of youth. So I remember going into clubs and just being confident and asking to speak to the guy who ran the club, speaking to him, giving him a tape. And, the tape has to be damn good.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's a hustle, I think. No one's going to just give you anything on a plate, especially in an industry where everyone wants to be working.
Yeah. So did you find a lot of you're competing with a lot of people to try and get gigs and stuff like that?
Not when I started,
Mm,
because I grew up on the Isle of Wight
yeah,
from the age of about 7 till the age of about 18, and there wasn't a huge scene down here. It was the late 90s,
yeah.
so there were DJs playing the music I liked for sure, but there were far less DJs than there were in other places like in London. And, now everyone with a laptop can be a DJ, whereas back then it was just a few people who had the equipment.
Was it with back in your youth, getting your first decks? Was it easy? Do you have a story behind that? Like, I know back when I started DJing, it wasn't easy to buy those Technics 1200s. They were quite expensive actually. I had a few friends that settled for some of the gear that was second best, but no, I had to have the best. What about you? Was it like, I know for myself, I had to work in a chicken shop for about 3 months to save up the money to get the decks. What was it with you? Was it an easy thing for you, or did you have a story behind it or a challenge?
No, it wasn't easy. I mean, I guess I was lucky in terms of I started producing before I started DJing.
Mm,
So I had my brother's hand me down Amiga 500. So I was lucky to be in a situation where I had an older brother who was into computer programming and wanted to upgrade his computer.
yeah,
So he gave me his Amiga 500, which was a starting point. And then I just plugged in a Casio keyboard to that was, just something I had when I was a kid that probably cost about 15 quid.
yeah,
But in terms of the decks, I mean, no, I had the first record deck I had was a single record player, again from my older brother.
mm,
That wasn't variable speed, it just had 33 and 45.
yeah.
And what he did was he butchered it and put a variable transistor or capacitor or whatever was needed to make it change. And he cut a groove to change the speed like this. But the thing is, when you went above 1% on the pitch, it would continue, it would get faster and faster and faster and faster. So I started with really, really crap equipment. And then the first pair of decks I had were a pair of Newmarks, and they were pretty crap as well.
Yeah.
I've never owned a pair of Technics. I won a pair of Vestax in a DJ competition, and they were the only like proper good pair of decks I had as a youth. And then when I was in DJing in London in the 20s, I managed to get enough money to buy a pair of CDJ 1000s. Yeah, so that's where I started really.
All right. What was this DJ comp? What was this DJ comp that you did? Was it a scratch one, or was it like a DJ mixing one? What sort of competition was it, and how old were you?
So I'm actually thinking, no, the Vestax decks, I can't remember how I managed to afford them. It wasn't from the remix competition, sorry, the DJ competition. I won a Vestax mixer from the DJ competition.
Yeah.
So that was, it was called Juice DJ, and it was run by the Telegraph newspaper. And it was basically a nationwide competition for university students. I think that was the criteria. And so I did a a local round and then a regional round, and then I think it was a national round then. And I came joint second place. So I think the girl that came first is now a Radio 1 DJ.
Oh
I
wow.
can't remember her DJ name. So yeah, she was more kind of playing like Indian style music, but with scratching and hip hop. So she was more on the urban end, and then I was playing house. Well, not just house, but more house. And the guy that came second place joint with me, he was playing drum and bass. So it was pretty varied. But
Yeah.
there were scratch DJs who were purely scratching as well.
Oh, okay. So what was the like? So you were into house music back in the 90s. What was the diversity like with music in England or London?
Well, a lot. You know, the UK's always been one of the forefront runners for dance music. You
Yeah.
know, there's yeah. So there's been house since I've remembered anyway.
Yeah.
There's house. There's been drum and bass. There've been breakbeat. There's been the rave scene, which kind of started in the UK. Um, you know, I used to listen to all of it. Really, I loved it all. Happy hardcore, drum and bass, just anything that excited me.
Oh. Yeah, no, because like I know for myself, it's in Australia, it's whatever's really fashion at the time. I think now at the moment, house has become really popular, EDM. But I remember when I
Yeah,
started in the 90s, it wasn't that popular. We really only just had pop music. And, I really aspired to come to England to see the lifestyle and to see the music scene for what it is. And you're yourself being quite fortunate growing up there. You were able to be exposed to it all, really, to be honest. Um,
yes.
so was how's your main inspiration growing up?
No, I mean, when I was really young, my dad used to play the Beatles and 10cc, like a couple of older bands, and I kind of liked them. But the first music that really excited me was the Prodigy, so
Yeah,
you know, like rave music.
yeah,
And then I heard an album called the Renaissance Mix Collection by John Digweed and
yeah.
Sasha, and that got me into house. And I guess that must have been about 1994, something like that. And then I started listening to trance music in about 96, and I absolutely loved that. And that's when I started DJing.
Okay.
Uh, but
Yeah,
I love so many different types of music. I just, yeah, I listen to a fair amount. I
no.
really like chill out stuff. I love Groove Armada. They're one of my favorite dance groups as well.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of Groove Armada. I think we all know that track. Is it I See You, Baby?
Yeah, yeah. That's one of my. It's not one of my favorite of their tracks,
Yeah.
but yeah, Groove Armada is pretty. They were ubiquitous in the late '90s and early 2000s.
So, with your remixing, have you had any opportunities to remix for any of these big artists like you've mentioned before?
Um, the biggest. I mean, the biggest person I've probably worked with is there two people really. There's a singer called Catherine Ellis,
Yeah.
who was on a lot of trance records in the late '90s, early 2000s. Incredible singer. Like you'd recognize a few songs that she was on.
Yeah.
And then an American guy called Ron Carroll, and he's worked with Axwell and the Swedish House Mafia and um, Bob Sinclair. Yeah, so I've never actually remixed one of my favorite artists like Axwell or Ferry Corsten. I've never remixed one of those guys or worked with them, but yeah, that would be great.
You never know. Maybe one day they'll come knocking on your door. But with the guys that you have remixed, do you have a lot of deadlines and stuff like that you need to meet? Is there a lot of pressure, like from the record labels, when they give you the jobs?
Yeah, I mean, the pressure is basically this is when we need it by,
Hmm.
which would usually be a couple of weeks. So it's not like they're ringing up every day and saying, "Have you done it? Have you done it?" It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there's a time by which it needs to be done, so you do it by that time.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. obviously they've got release dates and stuff like that. They want to release their tracks by, so yeah, they expect it to be in by a certain time. But
Absolutely, yeah.
so with being a producer and stuff like that, do you ever have like mind blocks or do you what's it called writer's block?
Mm.
Um,
That would be ironic if you couldn't think of that term at that point. um, yeah, for absolutely. Um, yeah. I guess it's a luxury that you can't really afford to have when you're producing every day for a living.
mm,
Um, you've just got to start, and then inspiration can hit. But I've got a few techniques that I use to get over that, because inspiration is like a rare treat. It's like lightning striking. So if you listen into music, or you go out for a run, or you go to an art gallery, that's the kind of thing that's going to help inspiration hit,
yeah,
rather than just sitting there, not doing anything.
yeah. So basically, listening to other music, going out to parties, going to an art gallery, just all those type of things help you get through your writer's block, does it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you don't have the luxury of time, of course,
Mm.
but definitely, like when I used to go clubbing a lot, when I was a teenager, sometimes I'd get the train from the Isle of Wight. You have to get a boat and then a train to London, and I'd go there, and then I'd dance all night, and then I'd get the train and the boat back in the morning. And, I was hearing the freshest new tunes
Mm.
up in amazing nightclubs, and that was great inspiration.
So when you're when you're trying to make music or trying to get work within the music industry, do you ever get any sort of depressional states and stuff like that? Do you ever get any demotivating times?
Yes, absolutely, for sure. Um, so I remember the good times as well.
Yeah,
So I remember winning a competition of this very prominent house producer called Joey Negro,
yeah, I know
and
him.
and I did a remix for him, and I won this competition. It was run by Future Music Magazine,
Mm.
and they sent me like I was like £3,000 worth of studio equipment, and I just remember feeling so high, and I thought my phone's going to be ringing every day. I'm going to get all this work, and then it doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
You don't just have one great thing happen and then it's all gravy. You still got to
yeah,
keep working. And the disappointing times. Um, Mostly is like not winning remix competitions or sending tunes to labels and having them denied. But over time, you just learn that rejection isn't a bad thing; it's an opportunity to learn.
yeah.
And if people are good enough to give you some feedback on why your music's shit,
Mm.
sorry if I can
No, I
say
get
that,
it. No,
bleep
that's
that
all
one
right.
out. Then that's when you have a word with your ego,
Yeah,
and then you say, okay, right, I'll take that on board, and then you can make improvements. So I think the depression mostly has come in the past from slogging away, working really hard, and having nothing to show for it,
mm.
um, and sitting on your own,
Yeah,
in some crappy bedsit in a bad part of town with no money, you're cold, you can barely afford to eat, and you're on your own and you're sitting at a computer making music. That's the depressing times.
I get that. Um, what would you do to get through those depressing moments? Did you have anything you did, or did you just slog at it and keep slogging away?
Various things. Gave up,
Oh,
get a job doing something I didn't like doing,
mm,
realized that I can't possibly do that because that's no life to live. So then take it up again,
mm,
keep trying. Um, yeah, it's I've stopped once or twice for a period of months or maybe a year or so, and then and then I just have to, it just draws me back, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case for anyone who really tries to give up something that they love. They'll be drawn back to it, despite the difficulties. And that's really what matters, is whether you can get back on the horse.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, so in terms of getting over the depression times, I found that having a bigger reason to do it is a good reason. So if you're just doing it for the fame, then then when things don't work out, you're going to be gutted. But if you're doing it for the love, then it's almost like a pure motive. And it doesn't mean that you don't want fame or you don't want money and all the stuff that people want. But if your primary driving factor is something like you just love doing it, then I think that probably would stave off some depression.
Okay, so you really got to enjoy what you're doing, basically. You can't just be having ulterior motives to be doing it. Otherwise, when you don't hit the goals that you want to hit, basically, you're gonna really be down in the poo, yeah?
Yeah. It's not, I'm not saying that I don't believe that people are good or bad or have pure it's always a combination. So as long as your primary motives are pure,
Yeah.
then the other motives that we all have, because you need to pay the rent, everyone likes to be told they're good and all of that stuff. But as long as that's way down the list of priorities, then I think you're going to stave off your disappointment and the depression.
Okay, so did you get a lot of rejection in the beginning, in the early days?
Oh yeah, for sure, because my music was rubbish. But I still get rejected now,
Yeah.
Now I'm not producing so much because I'm focusing on EDM tips. You get different kind of rejection, when you've got a bunch of subscribers, you get haters, and some of them say some nasty stuff. But I guess that comes with anything when you reach a certain level of, public awareness.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember doing one tune or one remix, and the manager of the singer came back and said, "You've just copied Madonna's latest song." I was like, "What? I haven't heard Madonna's latest song." And then he was like, "Yeah, you have. Now you're lying to me." I was like, and that really got my back up, because I hadn't heard the latest song, and I listened to it, and I was like, "That is remarkable."
Oh,
The
wow.
similarities of the bass line are remarkable, but I had never heard it before. It was complete coincidence. That really got my back up. Someone telling me I was a liar.
I could imagine, especially if you were honest,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a really interesting one, actually. I really like that. Well, not that I like that for you, but the idea that you were able to come up with something without hearing someone else's material but coming it up with your own is just, it's really interesting there. Like, and it almost, sorry?
I'm just saying it was one of those freak coincidences, because I only came up with the bass line because I put a random array of plugins on the bass and played with some of the settings until it just came up with something completely out of this world that I hadn't even planned. So that's how I know that I hadn't just subconsciously heard the tune on the radio and then copied it, because it was just a random coincidence.
Yeah. Did you record that on video on YouTube or something like that?
No, this was way, way ago. This was probably about 10 years ago, something like that.
So is it important to get feedback and take on criticism, or expect to take on criticism when you are producing music and wanting to get somewhere?
I think it's a double-edged sword. So if you're getting feedback from the right places, it's useful. But if you're getting feedback from the wrong places, it can be misleading and discouraging.
So did you ever have a mentor or anything like that growing up with your music production?
No, and that's something that, upon reflection, would have been really useful.
Yeah.
Because now I've realised the value of mentorship.
Yeah.
I had a couple later on from going to seminars music production seminars, and then getting to chat with these producers, like James Wiltshire from the Freemasons, and Stonebridge, who's the guy that wrote that "You Got to Show Me Love" tune by
Yep.
Robin S. Like old school producers, but who really know their stuff. And then those guys have, helped kind of guide me to a degree, and that's been really useful. But in terms of the YouTube channel, I have had mentors for that, and the difference it's made has been incredible. So I think mentorship is, if I was to start anything new, I would seek a mentor.
Okay, so I'm starting to learn with all these videos that I've done, all these episodes. Really, to get somewhere in life, it's really important to have a mentor to help, not so much hold your hand along the way, but provide a little bit of guidance, so you're on the right track and you're not going off track, if you know what I mean.
Exactly, yeah. And otherwise, you're trying to work out something that is so complicated, and you don't know if you're on the right track, and then you start second guessing yourself, and then you might go down the wrong track, and it's just such a big undertaking without guidance.
Yeah. So what inspired you to start EDM Tips?
A friend of mine that I was lucky enough to meet, who has become one of my mentors. I didn't want to do it at first. I was like, I don't want to make YouTube videos. It's just going to take loads of time. And it does take loads of time. But yeah, so I think I realized that I wanted to build something that was more scalable. That I didn't just do a remix job or a production job and then just get paid for my time, and that was that, because I want to build a different life from that. And I knew that EDM Tips, I didn't know it. I've kind of come to learn that there was potential in that.
So yeah, like, it is really your baby, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a baby that I kind of didn't want. It was like an accidental baby that I grew to love.
Oh, I like that one. So was it hard at the starting the academy? Like, did you have any, like, were you getting a lot of views straight off the bat, or was it something that you actually had to grow over time?
I had to grow over time. It's been the same journey of making inroads in music production. But it's easier now because of the nature of the internet and the connectivity of it. You're not having to go out to nightclubs to meet producers, and then to have phone numbers and all of that stuff. So the way I started was I took a course by an American guy called Ramit Sethi, called Zero to Launch. And I had my friend who was mentoring me. So I did those two things, and then I did some work for Sam Matler over at EDM Prod. I wrote a couple of blog posts, and he was good enough to feature them on his site. It's the same thing with music. It's, you reach out to people who have got a higher foothold in the industry than you, and you try and help them and make their lives easy. And then you can show your value, and then you can start building something.
Okay, so you think networking plays a big role in it, yeah? Networking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And the thing is, with music producers, quite often they can be introverted. But as I say, it's easier now because you can connect with people on social media and write them emails. You don't have to go out to a party, pretend to be someone you're not, and you have to generate the best possible version of yourself to be likable and engaging, and you can do that from behind your computer.
Yeah.
So it's easier.
So do you do all the do you obviously record your videos, do you do all the work behind the scenes with your videos, or do you ship them off to someone else to put together for you?
I do it all myself, and it's something I need to let go of. I need to relinquish some control, because it takes a long time.
I understand.
But I want my videos to be really like, I guess I'm kind of a bit too arrogant. I know the important points to point out because I know music production.
Yeah.
So I'm worried if I give it to an external editor, because they don't have the music production knowledge, they won't know what to chop out or what to cut. Um, but I think I'm just lying to myself, because pe- people aren't stupid.
Mm,
People are generally pretty switched on, especially if they've been doing what they're doing for a few years.
yeah. So how much, like, your videos, sometimes they'll go for about an hour or so. You've got some long ones, you've got some short ones. How much stuff do you actually cut out of your recordings when you record your videos?
So I've taken to doing these 40-minute to an hour long ones because they've been blowing up. And
Mm,
it's kind of like, again, I'll link it back to music production. And I was speaking to my students the other day on a live call, and I mentioned this producer called Trent Reznor that some people may know. He's the producer behind Nine Inch Nails,
mm,
and he produced several different tracks in several different genres under several different names, and then waited to see what the market reacted to,
mm.
and then chose to focus on that. So with EDM tips, these 40-minute to an hour long videos seem to be gaining traction, and people seem to be loving them. It's taken 4 years for me to stumble upon this niche,
Yeah.
much like it could take people 3 or 4 years to stumble across their signature sound
Mm,
when they're producing. But then when you find something that works, double down on it.
yeah.
So that's why I'm focusing on these at the moment.
All right.
And so to answer your question, I don't edit these 40-minute to an hour long ones at all. So people see the mistakes I make, and I think people like that.
Yeah, no, it shows you that you're a real person and you don't have any sort of facade, and you're basically going through the same mistakes we're making. So it makes us viewers able to connect with you a lot more, basically, because that's what I've come to learn with your videos. Like, I do watch some of your videos, and it just shows that I've got a legitimate person here basically talking to me, you know what I mean? And not someone with some sort of facade trying to, like you said before, be someone they're not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of preparation that goes into them. I listen to the style of music that I'm going to be preparing. I'll have a listen through my sounds and think, okay, well, I know that one's going to go well. So, there's a bit of prep work behind it, which takes some time. But then it takes a long time to just do the introduction, because I do edits there because I want to give people an example of what they're going to be learning.
Mm.
And then, subscribe now and all of that stuff. It usually takes me about, including promoting, about 8 to 10 hours on a video now. But it used to take longer.
So was it hard to learn the process of making these videos and editing? Was it easy for you, or?
Yeah, it was easy to me because I studied graphic design at university. So I used to do animating when I was a kid as well on my Amiga 500. I've always liked working with media. So art, design, music, that stuff's, yeah, I've always done all of those things. So there was a learning curve, but it wasn't that hard.
Right. So do you reckon anyone can make YouTube videos, or is it something that if people are going to do videos on YouTube, they've really got to spend some sort of time learning on?
I think anyone can do it. You know, I don't think everyone will succeed at it, but anyone can try, and you'll realize quickly if it's not for you.
Mm.
If you don't like then you can stop. But I think it's a really great democratic way of, as long as their algorithms aren't too influential,
Yeah.
which I'm beginning to have suspicions about. But it's fantastic that, obviously really, really poor people who can't afford even a computer or a phone aren't going to be able to do it. But the fact that you can get a laptop for $150 now,
Yeah.
um, which is enough to record a YouTube video, it's incredible. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, the world has changed. I remember when I got my first computer. When was it? It was in '95. I think, and it was just a 486 DX4100 computer. So at that time, it wasn't the top end because the Pentiums had just started coming out. But I
Yeah.
remember that computer, it was like $2,000 Australian. So to put in your terms, it probably would have been about £1,000, maybe
Yeah.
just a bit less than that. But that would have been a lot of money back then in the mid-90s, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. And remember, of course, that the phones that we have here now are probably about, I don't know, 128 times more powerful than that PC that you paid
Yeah.
$2,000 for in the 90s.
Yeah. No. I
I
just,
think it's as an incredible revolution as the printing press was. That's how much of an impact that it has, you know.
yeah, no, technology has really gone far. And yeah, like you said, what was once a big computer, now you have it in the power of your hands. Um,
Yeah.
and people, sometimes I don't think people see that with mobile phones, they don't realize how much of it's pretty much it's a miniature computer, really. Um,
Yeah.
and, some of the laptops even they build at the moment, the netbooks, I think they're pretty much mobile phone technology, but just in a different layout, really.
Yes, yeah. I think you'd struggle to be a YouTuber with just using a phone because the editing and all of that stuff. I've never tried it. I'm sure there's software that you could do it on, but it's got to be easier with a mouse and a keyboard.
Yeah, going through all
Uh,
those frames, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Was it easy to build your EDM tips brand, or was there a bit of work behind it?
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of work behind it. I've worked at it now almost 4 years. And I came in with the music production knowledge, which obviously helps. If you don't know anything about anything, then I guess it's going to be hard to make a good YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's taken a fair amount of work.
Okay, so did you have to do much SEO and stuff like that, like social media marketing?
Oh yeah, and I hate it, honestly. I hate that stuff. So that's where I have got little bits of help from, but I've self-taught most of it, but I really need to outsource some of it to programmers who can optimize the website, things like that. It's the biggest struggle has been juggling priorities.
Okay. So what are you doing in your normal days? Are you doing a bit of website design or website management and then working on videos? What do you do?
So it changes from time to time because I've just started running my 8 week production masterclass again a couple of weeks ago. So my my days now are different and more busy than they were before. They're not more busy; they're just different focus, basically. So, like last night, oh no, tomorrow night we've got another live group call with the ten guys who are on. I had one on Monday night. So that takes time. I'm always trying to improve the lessons. So today I'm going to be adding new lessons to it, improving some of the old ones. I always find something to do, but I've got to manage the social media adverts, and I'm getting help from my wife on that at the moment because that's what she does for a living. So I'm really lucky
Yeah,
in
you
that
are.
regard.
So with these classes, these master classes that you're doing, um, is it easy to like you've got people around the world signed up.
Yes.
Um, Managing all them together making a time slot where it's manageable for everyone, is that easy or does it have its own challenges?
It's not easy at all. Yeah, and some people, the biggest struggle, the biggest students who have struggled are actually those from Australia because of the time difference. So when I do it, if I do it at 6 p.m. here in England, that's usually about 10 or 11 in the morning in America, depending on where you are. For my European students, it's like 1 or 2 hours difference. But then obviously in Australia, we're talking 5 in the morning or something like that, or 4 in the morning. So But I've only had like probably 3 students from Australia in the masterclass. And then we just have to kind of work around it a bit. So they submit questions beforehand, I answer them on the call, and then they can watch the recording the next day. But yeah, it is a bit of a struggle.
I get that. I get that a lot because I like to watch the EPL, but having to, wake up either 5 o'clock in the morning or stay up all night is not an easy feat, to be honest.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
So, yeah, nah. What inspired you to do the masterclass?
Um, well, I take inspiration from other people in the same industry as me. So, as I said, I started off by doing Remixing's zero to launch, and then I created my first course, which was music theory for EDM producers. Actually, I wrote a book first, which was called Becoming a Music Making Machine, which is more about workflow and stuff. And then I got the idea for a masterclass because I took the Hyperbits masterclass,
Yep.
which you may have seen online
Yep.
by a guy called Sarek. And it was so good. I thought this is such a great format because you're actually giving people feedback each week. So that's what inspired me to do that format.
Okay. Do people produce, do they send you their own music to give them feedback on?
Every day I get like 10 people asking every single day, and I can't do it. So I just have to send them a response saying I can't do it. Because I get so many requests every day, because I'd be doing that all day every day.
So, when with your classes, do you do that as well? Do they send you music?
Yeah, in the masterclass, yeah. So there's weekly homework, and then there's feedback on that homework, and then there are live calls as well where people can ask questions, and then there's the Facebook group where people can ask questions too.
Okay. So, is it easy to give negative feedback? Like, if you honestly think there's things that need to be done, is it easy to do it, or do you get a bit scared giving feedback that's not so positive and having them get angry and stuff like that?
Well, no one gets angry because the kind of people who sign up for a fairly high price masterclass, they
Mm,
want results. And
yeah,
if I'm not honest with them, I'm doing them a disservice.
I get that.
Obviously it's not the nicest thing, but it's constructive feedback. So I'm not going to say this is rubbish, give
Mm,
up, you're a joke. I'm going to say your baseline isn't as strong as it could be because of this. Why don't you try this?
okay.
Um, so yeah, it's not negativity. It's constructive, really.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. Good to hear. So you're really just giving them pointers on where they can improve, so they can next time do a better job at what they're lacking in those certain areas. Yeah.
Yeah, and we also do if someone's really struggling, and we do these calls anyway halfway through and then at the end, but then they send me over their project files or my co-coach Neil, then we can open them up on a call, and then we can actually talk through and change stuff on the call together. If they haven't understood something.
Okay. I just got one question I really want to ask you about music. Teaching chords, is it easy?
Teaching chords,
Yeah.
uh, it's the basics are easy.
Mm,
Yeah. Obviously, for someone who's never done any music before, it's harder. Yeah, I mean that if you're creating most electronic dance music doesn't use super crazy chords like jazz would.
mm.
So to the level which I teach, it's pretty easy. Yeah.
Okay. So, just wanted to ask you, what are some tips you would give to people if they're wanting to get into the music industry and produce music and get it signed up with labels?
Um, First, start producing and produce regularly. And the quickest way I can think to really improve your skills is to try and replicate. Really, your listening skills are so important. So if you can get a track that you love and you take it into your DAW, your digital audio workstation, and then you loop one section of it and you turn it down by about 12 decibels because the music you're going to be bringing in will have been mixed and mastered. So it's going to sound really good, really loud, and you're going to listen to yours and think, oh, mine sounds rubbish in comparison. So if you take the volume down and then just try and replicate that loop and listen to every single element, every little layer in there. And that is the fastest way that I know of to really improve as quickly as you can. Now, in terms of getting signed, you want to be building relationships with the label beforehand. So commenting on the music that's being released, sharing music of artists who are on the label, starting a dialogue. And if you aim for people who are a bit lower down in their pecking order, so you're not trying to, approach your Armin van Buurens, but you're approaching people who maybe got 20 to 30,000 followers, every compliment that they get is still, they see it and it means a lot to them. So if you focus on some people who are higher than you in terms of skill and standing in the industry, but not so high that there's no way that you're going to contact them and have them respond.
Yeah.
But you have to have good music. That's the most important thing,
And mastering, should people learn to master their own music, or I understand that mastering plays a big role, but as part of learning the music making process, is mastering just as important?
No, mastering is not as important because you can obviously send it to a mastering engineer and get a good master for not much money nowadays. It's still worth learning because music production is holistic. It's holistic in some ways, So the sounds you choose are going to influence the chords that you make, or the chords that you make will influence the sounds you choose. The mix will influence the master. So it's definitely worth knowing at least how to master, even if you're not going to be really, really good at it, because you can just send it off and get it done. And if you're releasing on a label, they'll have their own mastering engineer anyway. So they'll just ask you to send them the mix down and then they'll have it mastered.
Oh, okay. Beautiful. Look, I'll wrap it up from here today, but I really appreciate you coming onto the show, the Neil Coutts Show, Will. Will, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to be able to do that?
Probably dropping comments on the YouTube channel or in the community on there. On the Facebook page, which would be, I think it's facebook.com/EDM Tips Official. I think that's it. Actually, let me just double check whilst you're on there. Yeah, EDM Tips Official, that's right. And they're the best ways, really.
Okay. Look, what I'll do is I'll put those links into the description down below there, so people can just simply click on them and go directly to your pages. But just for everyone out there, I just wanted to let you guys know, if you enjoyed this channel and the videos, hit the subscribe button. And on the right-hand side there, you've got the notification bell where you can hear about future episodes coming out. But if you really enjoyed this episode with Will Darling, smash the like button there, the thumbs up. But thank you very much for coming onto the show there today, Will.
It's a pleasure, Neil. Thank you very much for the invitation.
You're welcome. And to everyone out there, thank you very much for watching today. I hope you have a really good day and enjoy your day. Thank you.
Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand.